from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Blake Stevens. Another election day will be here soon, so today we're focusing on a race that was fairly quiet in the primary, the U.S. House District 2 seat here in Tennessee. First-term Congressman Republican Tim Burchett is up against Democrat Rene Hoyos again. The two squared off for the same seat back in 2018. I spoke to both candidates asking a series of questions, starting with why voters should consider choosing them in November.
My whole political career has been that I've always tried to look out for the little man and woman, the people that do most of the living and dying in our community and most of the work, but seem to be underrepresented. And I've tackled a lot of tough issues. We've addressed, my congressional career is much like my mayoral career and my state senate career. I kept taxes low. I fought to pay down debt, which is foreign in Washington. I haven't passed a budget in over 20 years. So I've kind of made those my hallmarks of limited government. But I've been very successful at passing legislation as a freshman. I've passed several pieces of legislation. It's primarily looking after folks that are, as the Bible says, the least amongst us. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that.
The last time I ran on getting health care for all of our citizens and lowering the cost of prescription drugs and, making sure that people with pre-existing conditions got covered, increasing a minimum wage that's $7.25 an hour, things that folks need to have the kind of life that we expect to have in a country as rich and beautiful as the United States. And we just aren't seeing that here in this district. And so those are the issues I ran on then. Nothing really has changed much because the Senate's blocked everything. So they're the issues that I'm running on now. And then you add the coronavirus and, it's devastated our economy, and we're going to see evictions and joblessness. We're already seeing a lot of joblessness, and it's important that we find ways to solve these problems so that people can continue to function in this world.
My next question, you guessed it, surrounded the coronavirus. I asked that they rate the federal government's response to the pandemic and what should be done going forward.
I think it's been what we would expect. I think it's been pretty poor. We loaded up with pork projects. The Speaker of the House delayed it many days so she could get funding for the Kennedy Performing Arts Center, and one bill was delayed. They were trying to get something for the marijuana farm in California and things like that. But both sides do it. You can't really point the finger at the Democrats because the Republicans, before I was in Congress, I doubt it would have changed much, but I would hope that I would have been a voice of reason when we controlled all three branches of government and we failed to do something about the wall, our southern border, actually, health care, and passing a budget, which both parties, that's the key thing. That's really what you're constitutionally mandated to do, and we're derelict in our duties. So I would think that we need to focus on those kind of things first and reach across the aisle to do that. But nobody does that because Washington, D.C. is all about power. It's about who's in power. If you're not in power, you want it from somebody else, and the heck with the country and the Constitution for that matters. So I would hope that in any new COVID funding mechanisms or bills, that it would be responsible to the people that are hurting and quit with all the nonsense of like when we bailed out the bankers and no one went to jail. And it just, those kind of things. That's why I sponsored legislation that if there is, in fact, an airline bailout, that none of the money goes to their corporate bigwigs for buyouts and things like that, that it actually affects the workers on the ground.
We've been expecting a pandemic for a while. The last one was 100 years ago. However, how we respond to it is everything. And I would give this administration a 0 for response. Donald Trump was briefed on it. He didn't do anything about it. He waited for several months, closed some borders, but by then it was too late. And then, the legislature has been sitting on relief funds and arguing about how we're going to, do we want to give people $300 a month or $600 a month when people are losing their jobs and their homes of no fault of their own. We need to first get this virus under control. We need to have more funding for contact tracing. We need more funding for our medical staff and our frontline employees to be better protected. This state needs to expand Medicaid. We've got rural hospital closures, the highest in the country, and we need to have those hospitals functioning so that people aren't having to drive 3 hours to get medical care. Then we need to have better contact tracing. We need to test people more. We need to test people that don't have symptoms right now. We need to also test people that have had coronavirus to see if they've got sufficient antibodies and an antibody response. And then we need to really work on this economy. We've got to keep people in their homes, and we've got to keep them salaried until we get through this. And of course, then we need a vaccine. And I was heartened to see that the medical community and the scientific community is coming together with guarantees to not rush this vaccine, because you don't want a rushed vaccine. Nobody wants to be an unwitting guinea pig to a vaccine trial.
Both the Republican incumbent and the Democratic candidate pledged to work with the other side if you send them to D.C.
I worked with the other side on legislation dealing with veterans, and also with folks that are just getting out of prison, making sure that they have access to entrepreneurs, so that we don't have that revolving door of recycling those folks back into prison. But as a freshman, there's people that have been there decades that have never passed legislation, and I've been fortunate as a freshman to sponsor and co-sponsor several pieces of legislation that have actually passed the House. So. And you cannot do that without bipartisan support.
And I would reach across the aisle. I did it when I was the executive director of the Tennessee Clean Water Network. We had legislation that I had a lot of Republican sponsors and Democratic sponsors, and at one point I had an independent sponsor of legislation to protect clean water. And yeah, I've done it before, and I can do it again. And I think a lot of it is creating relationships and spending time with your colleagues and, working together to solve problems and not be so turfed out in a partisan fashion.
My final question was about the biggest differences they view between themselves and their opponent.
I would probably say values. I value our law enforcement. I value the rule of law. She seems like a very nice person. But I differ with her on a lot of those things, on life, the abortion issue, the Second Amendment. As I said, defunding the police, and they'll be quick to say, "Oh, we don't want to defund the police. We just want to put the money elsewhere." And so, in reality, they are defunding the police. I support a border wall. I think we've got laws in place, and we should obey those laws. And with that comes a lot of other responsibilities. And also, I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. I think people ought to be responsible for their actions. We always seem to want to blame guns for violence, but we don't blame a spoon and a fork for obesity. So, it's just, I think it's a way of thinking. Being from East Tennessee, growing up here, I think I share the common values that most of the folks do here.
The incumbent Congressman Burchett is a lifelong politician. He's taken tens of thousands of dollars from out-of-state special interests. So he's not really spending much time, listening to our needs or talking to us. He's more influenced by special interest. I've taken a pledge to not take any corporate funding, and he's voted against things like health care provided to folks with pre-existing conditions. He has voted against free COVID testing. He's voted against housing for homeless veterans. He voted against a bill that would give rural entrepreneurs a leg up in federal projects. This is not a representative who's really thinking about the people here in East Tennessee and what they need. We have a homeless problem. A lot of them are veterans. We need to care for them. We have lots of folks here that are having a hard time accessing health care because our hospitals are closing down or they can't afford insurance. We have the highest rate of health insurance or health care debt, one of the highest rates in the country, and he's done nothing to fix those things. And you know, there were really good bills that came through the House that he could have supported, and yet he chose to work against our interests.
Still to come, COVID-19 cases growing on UT's campus, and later our panel of pundits. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6. On your side, stay with us.
Reporting on the issues and the impact in East Tennessee. We're working on the answers to what's next. We're with you every step of the way.
If you have Medicare and Medicaid, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee is here to offer you even more benefits with a Blue Care Plus plan at no extra cost.
My Blue Care Plus plan means I have someone right here in Tennessee on the other end of the phone when I call.
It means I have people like Allie who listen and really care.
It means I get more medical, dental, and vision benefits. Like $5,000 for dental care.
And $1,200 for hundreds of over-the-counter items.
Plus 100 rides for doctors and pharmacy visits. That's a lot of rides.
As a not-for-profit with a mission to serve, we're right here for you and with you.
I love having Tori in my corner. Everybody needs a Tori.
You can enroll in a Blue Care Plus plan at any time.
Get these great benefits and more. Call 833-807-1234. That's 833-807-1234.
Tonight on News Nation.
From doctor to patient, nearly 150 days in acute care.
I never thought I would make it.
How this Connecticut physician finally made it home after a harrowing battle with COVID-19. That's tonight on News Nation, 8/7 Central on WGN America.
Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. UT facing challenges managing the COVID-19 situation, seeing case numbers continue to grow. Well, Knoxville Chancellor Dondi Plowman said she didn't want to point fingers, but she did point out some issues coming from what she described as a small number of students.
But the fact remains, we are having a significant issue with a small number of students. And we have disturbing information stemming, frankly, from the fraternities in particular. Fraternity leaders communicating to houses how to have parties and avoid being caught, avoid the police. Stories of a fraternity renting space off campus to have their party, crammed with lots of people in close quarters. Telling fraternity members not to get tested or how to get tested so the results are not shared with the university.
Well, that was Tuesday. By the time of our taping Thursday night, more than 2,000 students there were isolating themselves from others to slow the spread of COVID-19. And that day, UT rolled out new steps to limit activities on campus. Also last week, UT announcing it was moving students out of Massey Hall to make room for self-isolating students. Thursday, I had a chance to hear about what life is like in isolation from students themselves. More than 2,000 UT students told to isolate themselves from others to slow the spread of COVID-19. Nearly half of those students live off campus, like Mateo Sforza. Since he can't walk around campus and meet up with his friends, he's had to find other ways to spend his free time.
Just by listening to music, watching movies, and playing music, because I have 2 guitars that I play, and I keep in constant contact with my friends over, Snapchat, FaceTime, things like that. So it's not as bad as it could be.
I also spoke to 2 roommates living at White Hall who were both told last night they needed to self-isolate.
Now everybody's kind of isolating, and it's very quiet.
It's very quiet. I think they clean our bathrooms,
4 times a day
4 times
in
a
hazmat
day.
suits.
The 2 appreciate the university's effort to make their 2-week experience more comfortable, like having meals delivered to their door. And while the situation isn't ideal, they understand a need to stay inside.
We feel pretty suffocated because, it is a dorm, so it's very tiny.
It's like 21 by 12 feet.
We are definitely not in the worst situation because this is a very, very new dorm, but it doesn't feel good to be trapped in here. Can't talk to really anybody outside.
At least we like each other.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Well, Whitehall, you saw there, was identified as home to one of the clusters on COVID-19 on campus. Well, Thursday, Chancellor Dondi Plowman announcing changes on campus to slow the spread. Changes like no visitation allowed on campus in any campus building. Only residents who live in the building can enter that space. All on-campus dining will be converted to carry-out. The T-Rex gym will close down for 2 weeks. Fitness classes can be held outside or virtually. All indoor, in-person campus events are canceled. These changes are in effect until at least September 27th. By the way, in-person classes and research will continue there. Earlier in the week, Chancellor Plowman pointed a message about the growth of cases on campus and behavior she said was contributing to that number. Well, still to come, our panel of pundits. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side.
Huntsville Manor is a post-acute and rehabilitation center in Huntsville, Tennessee. Our staff are what makes Huntsville Manor different. They are our heroes, and we want to introduce them to you. It's our people that makes us special. Love, caring, and compassion. Huntsville Manor in Huntsville. Come visit us.
The sun is still shining. The waves keep rolling in, and the beach is waiting. We love being outside, with the sun on our face and our toes in the sand. Myrtle Beach is 60 miles of wide open beaches with good times, great people, and plenty of space to find your place and get back to what matters most. We belong at the beach. When you're ready, we're ready. Visit Myrtle Beach.
Where's Mommy?
Oh, hey, sweetie. Mother Nature is at work, but Father Nature's here.
I'm hungry.
Let's see. Oh, well, how about some Smucker's Natural?
Yes.
First ingredient, real strawberries.
Oh, Mommy's home!
Wrestling with a design debacle in your house?
Email Living East Tennessee your problem and let the Knoxville Wholesale Furniture Design Center help.
Your design question could be answered on the show.
Any problem, any room, email us your question today.
All right, well, let's get started here. We've got George Corda, James Corcoran, and Courtney Piper with us today. Let's start by talking about that race for Congress. It's another Burchett-Hoyos matchup this November, and you all heard from the candidates. I'm curious, I was looking at the numbers from the last election, 65 to 33. Hoyos virtually got half the votes that Congressman Burchett received. Based on what you heard and based on what you've seen, is this campaign proving to be any different? Courtney, we'll start with you.
Sure. And first, let me say that I used to work for Rene way back in the day at the Tennessee Clean Water Network. But yeah, I think what Rene is trying to accomplish is just turn up as many Democratic voters as she can in the 2nd Congressional District. Getting less than 40% of the vote for a Democrat is not the greatest showing. And I think what she is trying to do is just drum up Democratic voters in the 2nd District.
James, did anything stick out to you from our conversation with Hoyos and Burchett?
It did. This is about the only time I can recall a congressional candidate who's a Democrat and who is far left actually criticizing Donald Trump for not closing our borders fast enough. It just boggles my mind that someone would have the unmitigated gall to do that. And it also just irks me when someone's gotten 33% of the vote, and really she was down ticket from Bredesen, who is extremely popular, who came pretty close to being about dead even in Knox County, which is a huge part of the district population-wise, to then say that her values are the values of the 2nd Congressional District. I think the voters have already spoken that our values are not the values of the 2nd District.
George, James brings up a good question. I want to ask you that original question, but first, he was talking about the Bredesen impact on the last race. Will the presidential election have an impact on the race this go around?
Well, sure, you're going to have a higher turnout. And Rene Hoyos is a well-spoken, intelligent, and sophisticated person who is going to be waxed yet again in an election. If she's able to get within 20 points of Burchett, she can declare a major moral victory, but I don't think she's going to get even that close. that's just not in the cards. Burchett is a popular guy. And that's not to say that she's a bad candidate. Actually, she's a good candidate. She is hampered by the positions of the National Democratic Party, by having Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Burchett get a larger margin than he did last time.
Now, George, I think you're wrong about that, because what do you always say about Tim Burchett?
That he speaks fluent East Tennessee.
Yeah, and I think, what Rene Hoyos is trying to do is essentially trying to change the language of East Tennesseans, and that's just not going to happen in an election or 2 or 3 or 4. Tim's very successful because, as George said, he speaks fluent East Tennessee.
Courtney, I'm sorry. Courtney, are you suggesting that this run is sort of on the premise of changing the conversation, moving, changing hearts, changing minds over time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any sort of national pundit or data cruncher will look at the 2nd Congressional District in the state of Tennessee and say, oh, that's a solid red district. It's never going to change. And I think what Rene is doing with this campaign, because like George said, she's a really great candidate, but in the 2nd district, it is solidly red. And I think what she's trying to do is, for the Democratic Party in the state of Tennessee, try and drum up and attract every single possible Democratic voter she can in the 2nd district, which would then help other races.
All right, let's move on to schools, both public and our big university in town. So we've had a school close in Knox County due to a lack of substitutes, and of course we've seen a dorm building at UT being used only for students to self-isolate. My question to you all, based on what you're seeing, how long can we sustain this? Will it continue this way, or will we all be online by the end of the semester? George, what do you think?
Well, the question is, what is the goal? What is the objective? Is the objective to stop transmission of COVID-19? Well, that's not going to happen. That is an impossibility. We have vaccines for the flu, and we can't stop the flu. So if that's the case, then we just need to shut everything down now out of fear that somebody's going to get COVID-19. Is it 10% of the students or faculty? Is it 5%? Is it a transmission rate of X%? What is the goal? Because when the stories are continuously, there are new cases, therefore this is dangerous, you can never avoid the danger. And you can never do anything. So what is the goal? Does anybody know? Have I missed that?
The goal,
either at the public school or university level?
I think slow the spread, but you're not asking me. You're asking the panel.
I'm asking anybody who knows.
James, how long do you think, or where do you see this heading?
Oh, I think George brings up a really good point that we really don't have any set metric. I mean, if everyone remembers back in March when the shutdown really first clamped down, everyone kept seeing on social media the little curve, and the idea was flatten the curve. And the idea was make sure that we have enough room in our hospitals that people who get the virus can be adequately treated. And now we're just moving the goalposts all over the place. I mean, I've got 2 children who just started kindergarten for the first time. They're going in person, and part of that's because I've got a special needs son who can't get what he needs virtually. It's an impossibility. He needs occupational therapy, physical therapy, and things that the school system is designed to provide and can be done in person. And I firmly believe that we need to try to keep our schools going as much as we can for the people who are willing to try it.
Courtney, do you think there's a well-defined goal here? And based on what you're saying, do you think it's sustainable, or where do you think we're heading?
Well, it seems like we're heading into just an operational nightmare. The public health crisis aside, it doesn't seem like we have enough infrastructure, if we want to talk about schools in particular, to support where we are in this public health crisis. And with the Cedar Bluff School, I think you're seeing that. well, we don't have enough substitute teachers, so now we've got to go virtual for X period of time, and then maybe everybody can come back to school, which is just, it causes logistical nightmares for parents. And so, I think we've been very clear with the goal from the beginning. It was to slow the spread. Mayor Kincannon's been very clear with her 5 actions. The Knox County Public Health Department and also doctors at UT Medical Center have been very clear with, as our positivity rating increases and as our case counts increase, they can see a place where our hospitals might get overcrowded or to a point where we might be in that red zone. And the Knox County Public Health Department does have those metrics that we are supposed to be looking at, the red, yellow, green benchmarks. So, this is a place where we really need to rely on those public health experts to tell us and give us the data and information we need to make other decisions and let them drive the conversation.
I think my last question, and I'm going to have to hold you guys to 30-second responses here. Bob Woodward released that audio of the president admitting to downplaying the coronavirus in an attempt to avoid panic. Now, obviously, there are 2 very different views on how to receive this audio, but I want to ask each of you what you take away from it. James, I'll start with you.
Throughout the entirety of this epidemic, the Democrats have been saying, listen to the experts. Dr. Fauci, who everyone on the left has been saying knows what he's doing, knows what he's talking about, has said that Donald Trump's response was appropriate and it was not dishonest and it was not misleading. So let's listen to the experts and let's just accept the fact that what Donald Trump did was right. It was based on looking out for the best interests of the country, and it was trying to avoid a panic.
George?
Yeah, I mean, if Fauci thought he had a chance to stick a knife in Trump's gut, he'd do it. And instead, he's defending him. I think the president was monumentally in error to have these conversations with Bob Woodward, because you can take portions and hear them and have a tape interview and have one idea of it, and then you hear a whole thing and you have a different idea. I just think it was a bad idea altogether. Any number of presidents have tried to keep panic from entering into the public domain, and if Trump did it, then he's got to be judged for that.
Courtney?
The problem here is that Donald Trump knew how deadly and dangerous the coronavirus was, and he was making public statements that caused a lot of panic and division still throughout our country, because he was saying, oh, it'll just disappear. We have it under control. It'll disappear. So you don't stop the spread of panic by lying to the American public. You shoot straight with them. You show leadership. You have a plan. And that's what was lacking with the president's response.
All right, the most controversial topic of the night, and you all, can I say it, George? Behave. There was no.
Give me a couple of more minutes here.
No. If I had it, I'd give it. But I want to thank